mate, David McBride. Now, it might look like he's having fun, but sadly, this is our last shower together as best friends, because David here is going to prison for life. He's what you'd call a whistleblower.
I like his new haircut. He looks handsome.
You all know what a whistle sounds like. Now, he's a soldier who served in Afghanistan who realized that Aussie soldiers were committing some of the most heinous war crimes imaginable and his superiors were covering it up. So he told the public about it. And thanks to David's bravery, nothing happened. Nothing. All the war criminals and generals are free. All the politicians are free. David's the one that's going to jail for the crime of telling us about it. Oh. So, how long are you going to jail?
It's a good icebreaker. Yeah, well, I don't know. It could be the rest of my life. So that brings things into a sharp focus, because you kind of think this could be the last time I go to Bondi Beach, last time I watch a movie, last time I play PlayStation. You want to come up? Oh. If I go inside, I want to.
Oh yeah, I saw this. I saw Mr. Mauled. It sucks that pay part of their college tuition sounds like one of the most empty statements ever. Did he make $50,000 or $20,000? I paid off my student loans with the earnings from my Hasan the Hun Clips channel. Stay mad. Dude, they're literally getting mad at people making... Dude. I love when... And it's not even one guy. There's like many others, right? And they're so fucking butthurt. Thanks for posting my W, Mr. Divorcelli. Can you give a dollar amount? It's like, bro, I didn't find him. He found me. He came up to me and said, oh, I paid off my fucking tuition with the earnings that I got. That's so fucking funny, dude. That's so funny. Ask how much his child support you help him pay. Dude, I pay all of it. I personally paid all of the fucking child support with like every fucking fuck Hasan clip that he's made on his channel. I'm over here paying for 2 divorces, dude. D fans realizing no one wants to watch this shit ad nauseum, not even his own fans. No, his own fans love that shit. I mean, they watch me more than they watch him probably, but you know. Yes, you wasted your time in school to have 2 pieces of paper you don't do anything with, suckle off a man child, but we are quite upset. 2, who's the second one? Daily Dose of HasanAbi. Well, considering that Divorcelli is a prominent figure in the fucking HasanAbi Clips industrial complex, because he posts footage from this stream almost as much as my fans do, it's very odd for a man whose child support I've been paying to be confused about this process. You know what I mean? He knows better than anybody else. Look at Grafton's bio. This guy? Professional Pokemon player? Oh, that's cute. I met a dude yesterday who asked if I like D, saying he has good points. Showed him that actually it's a Phoebophilia clip, and I've never seen a more grossed out face. Yep. True whistleblower story. Okay, let's keep going.
I try to get him be my cellmate.
Well, you got to get him to whistleblow.
The drug dogs. You could whistleblow the drug dogs.
False positives. On purpose.
You could infiltrate the drug dogs.
Now, to understand how David got into this position, we've got to understand what brought him to Afghanistan and what brought anyone to Afghanistan. And to do that, we need to go back to the 70s when Afghanistan was really cool. The only issue with Afghanistan was that it was a socialist country aligned with the Soviet Union, so the CIA took it upon themselves to turn the country upside down. They launched Operation Cyclone, the largest covert operation in CIA history. It pretty much involved flooding every right-wing Islamic extremist in the country with money and weapons. Literally, if you were a murderous incel in Afghanistan in the 70s, the CIA was there to make you a millionaire. Like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, for example. Now, this guy's a real piece of shit. He failed his engineering degree, so when he saw smart women who thrived at university, he threw acid in their faces. But thanks to CIA funding and training, this guy hit the jackpot and became one of the leaders of the Mujahideen, fighting a holy war against the Afghani government and later against the Soviets too. Now, I can't stress how massive this secret operation was. They were spending $630 million a year on the Mujahideen. At one point, the CIA...
The only thing I will add on to this is that, like, to be fair, the Afghan government definitely was fucking up, okay? The socialist USSR aligned Afghan government was fucking up so much that even the USSR was like, we got to get these motherfuckers out of here. They're out of control. It wasn't just like regular old USSR style suppression of religion. It was way beyond. It was beyond the pale. I mean, they definitely were not doing a good job. They are right. You are a lib. Come on, man. Get the fuck out of here, dude. They were just murking dudes in fucking mosques and shit. Get the fuck out of here.
They got the University of Nebraska to print these like educational children's books
This
that
part
they
is
like
true,
spread
though.
all over Afghanistan. Taught you all sorts of useful stuff like how to behead infidels or how to count to 10 in the most fucked
Yeah, they were so bad. Other Afghan communist forces opposed them and even took part in the fight against them. They were not good.
way possible. And the CIA won. For a period, the Soviets intervened to prop up their ally, but that eventually bankrupted them and they withdrew, and a few years later, the Afghani government fell to the Mujahideen. Women could no longer go to school. The country descended into a 20-year civil war to decide which group of CIA-funded right-wing fundamentalist arseholes would run the country. You had the hot one, or the incel guy, or this guy with one eye. So it turns out the one-eyed guy won. Yeah, nice. And his Taliban took over all of Afghanistan. Now, the US was happy whining and dining these guys for decades until a bunch of Saudis flew some planes into the World Trade Center. Suddenly, the US started questioning their love for right-wing Islamic extremists, and they wanted revenge. Not against Saudi Arabia, they're the US's allies. No one's touching them, obviously. They went after Afghanistan because that's where Osama bin Laden was hiding. Now, the Taliban had been trying to get rid of bin Laden for years before September 11, and when they heard the Americans were going to invade...
Yep, they did. Okay, this is good so far.
like,
Very good.
Fuck. Okay, we'll give Osama bin Laden up to the International Criminal Court. Just don't invade us. But as you know, the Americans invaded anyway and started the longest war
We don't negotiate with terrorists, remember?
in American history. 20 years and hundreds of thousands of dead bodies.
Have I them?
So why did they do this? Well, maybe it's so they could have bases bordering Iran, China, and Russia, or maybe it was just to launder money for the military-industrial complex. Who knows? Now, David suggests that the main factor is actually this like perverse marketing exercise where America had to, show that they could punish anyone for September 11, and the more kills they get, the more votes they get.
Everything was done in order to impress the domestic media. They did focus groups of sort of redneck, and they couldn't really understand who the Taliban were. And they wanted to fight a country. Let's fucking smash it up.
Oh, you guys want to know what a funny story this is? You said ruined our airports and security theater. Funny, we did that to ourselves. So the Australian government, this is something that an Australian Uber driver told me. So I don't know how fucking valid this is. But apparently the Australian government, in solidarity in the aftermath of 9/11, actually implemented the same exact fucking security theater that the TSA was implementing because in his words, he's in Australia, he said, we want the Americans to come to our country and we want them to feel safe. We want them to feel the same safety that they feel in America. So we are going to cuck ourselves in solidarity and implement the same security protocols, the same security theater. That's fucked. Also, hi, Mom. I'm on a HasanAbi stream. Why are you talking to a taxi driver about 9/11? I forget why we were having that conversation.
Up, you know. They probably would have had a better result if they.
Not true. Australia doesn't have TSA like security theater on domestic flights. You can go through the gate as a non-passenger. First of all, you're talking to someone who literally did go through a TSA like security theater now, but for a domestic flight between Sydney and Melbourne, not that long ago, mate. However, what I'm talking about is about international travel, where they did implement the TSA style security theater in Australia in the aftermath of 9/11. So you're wrong on both accounts, mate. I was in fucking Australia not that long ago, mate.
They negotiated with the Taliban and got Osama bin Laden handed over. Yeah. But that wouldn't have won votes in, for the rednecks.
Did you have these thoughts before you joined the Defence Force?
No, I didn't. I was definitely a true believer in the West and democracy.
So David actually thought he was sacrificing his life to fight terrorists. And this wasn't his first time. He's been a decorated soldier for a while, but this time was different. He decided to use his law degree in what he thought was a fight for democracy. He enlisted as a military lawyer for the Australian Special Forces, the SAS. His job was to make sure his soldiers were following the rule of law.
When they're dropping bombs on people, you've got to make sure that everything, the boxes are ticked. And it might be an in-house lawyer in a company that kills people, I guess. But
Now, the army gave David's family a gift, right? And it's the gift of a brand new dad with PTSD. But aside from that, what David got from those 2 tours of Afghanistan eventually radicalized him as well.
And the analogy I normally use was, it's a bit like being married to a serial killer who you really love. Yeah. And when they come home, the first time they come home with blood on their shoes and they say, oh, I broke my nose at work, you're like, oh, okay. Second or third time, and there's piles appearing in the garden. And it's not till you have something concrete to say they're meant to be in Cincinnati and you knew that they were in New York when the murder occurred, that you suddenly, all those other things fit together.
Now, over time, little by little, all these dodgy reports kept piling up on David's desk, and they looked like pretty heinous war crimes, but his superiors kept ignoring them.
I saw a lot of suspicious reports. The military investigator signed off on it and said, no problem, nothing to see here now.
But there were some really horrific things in there that David couldn't ignore, like the exploits of Australia's most decorated soldier, Ben Roberts-Smith.
Back in 2006, in Ben Roberts-Smith's sort of first major medal, he'd shot like a 10-year-old boy unarmed, and other SAS people said, what the fuck are you doing? And they were meant to be hidden away in a silent, unseen overwatch. And he gave his position away by killing this guy that the other SAS soldiers said was just a shepherd boy minding his own business. And then other people came out, probably villagers of the town, and they shot all them as well. And he got a medal for it. And when the Defence Force gave him a medal, they said, they turned the one shepherd boy into a Taliban militia force trying to outflank the SAS position. Now, that Ben Roberts-Smith didn't write that. The Defence Department wrote that. Right, to cover because to make him the hero, because they wanted to sell the war. Good-looking guy. He was good in a press conference.
Now, to properly understand why these cover-ups were happening, we've got to understand what was going on the ground in Afghanistan when David joined in 2012. Osama bin Laden was dead, and so was their whole reason for being in Afghanistan, right? The army had no strategic goal, and everything they tried to do seemed impossible. Like, every person they killed was replaced by 3 more Afghanis who were rightfully furious that this foreign invader murdered their family. And if you weren't joining the Taliban resistance, you were at the mercy of the local warlords we put in power, who were pretty much similar to the Taliban, except they had the added bonus of also being pedophiles, but they were on our side, so who cares, right? The important thing is the military knew the war was unwinnable.
I knew something was up when we kept on saying, we'll win the war next year. But we said that the year before. And they were saying that because that's what the politicians wanted to hear. They wanted to hear, and everyone got promoted, and you put up PowerPoints saying, we're just on the cusp of victory. They had a plan, but it wasn't really to win the war. It was to win the...
By the way, for those of you who don't know, when he's talking about a guy who ticks off war crimes, who like checks a box to say that these war crimes are actually good, that was literally Ron DeSantis's job in the Navy. That is precisely what he did. That is literally what Meatball Ron did.
2004 presidential election, drop bombs on people in turbans, get kill counts, and make it look like this is how we treat America's enemies. Nobody lost an election by sending more troops.
I'm announcing today additional American troop deployments to Afghanistan.
It is in our vital national interest to send an additional 30,000 U.S. troops to Afghanistan.
This was
The
a
surge,
forever,
baby.
driven by
The
market,
surge.
a never-ending string of random fabricated victories, enemy deaths that we were led to believe would bring us closer to some undefined goal, but everyone in power knew nothing would ever be achieved. The war was unwinnable. But this had effects on the ground. Like, once they realized that the war was all about marketing and every mistake, no matter how horrendous, would become a victory, the military establishment realized that anything goes.
We just thought the law was a joke. We had become a sort of a lawless organisation where anything went. Whatever the PR people wanted for the day was what happened.
Now, there was one law we never broke, though. And it's the law that says Uncle Sam is always right. You see, to understand Australia's role in the war in Afghanistan, you have to understand that September 11th didn't happen in Sydney. Well, I mean, it did happen. It happened right after the 10th, but it was just another day here, right? We were only in Afghanistan because we like to follow the Americans when they invade other countries.
The Chief of the Defence Force even said it. We are only in Afghanistan to make the Americans happy. Anything the Americans wanted us to do, we did. With an almost shameless excitement, without really thinking about whether we could do it.
As you might know from our Pine Gap video, we once had a leader that stood up to the Americans, and the Americans removed him from power. Since then, every Aussie government has tried their best to prove that they're a trustworthy lackey in America's empire, and Afghanistan was our time to shine. Now, the Americans had a problem, right? They needed higher kill counts for their domestic audience, but their special forces were already under a bit of scrutiny for war crimes. But their little Aussie lapdogs were much less relevant. No one cares what we get up to in Afghanistan. And even if they did catch us talking about our heinous war crimes, no one could really understand our stupid accents anyway. So the Americans delegated their dodgiest killings to us through something called JPEL, Joint Priority Effects List. Now, this list was full of kill capture targets, but we decided to read them just as kill targets because it's much, much easier than capturing someone. And sometimes you've got to kill a bunch of extra people on top of that because, you're bored. Now, the Aussies got so good at these missions that we took over the territory given to the Dutch and the British and the Canadian forces, who were hesitant to do the things that needed to be done because it would be politically damaging if their people found out what they were doing. But we didn't give a shit. We just wanted to impress the Americans, so we became their most loyal executioners. But unfortunately, we were a bit too good at doing the US's dirty work, right? The rumors of war crimes started circulating and the military establishment was freaking out.
They did know about Robert Smith. The complaints finally got through, and they said, fuck, this is an issue. We can't have our fucking star player go down. Not only they cared so much about him, but all the people that have been shaking his hand and the Governor General pinning medals on him, and it's going to be huge.
Suddenly, the government needed to reverse course and start covering their tracks.
A kind of warning was put out to all the troops saying, basically, don't murder people. And when I said, what's that about?
So the government was suddenly really serious about war crimes, but obviously they're not going to go after the decorated war criminals whose crimes they spent a decade covering up. No, what they needed was a sacrificial lamb. A fresh, brand new soldier that could be made an example of to show that the Australian leadership cares about war crimes. And it was David's job to prosecute him. What
they tried to do is get scapegoats in order to make sure that no one looked too closely at him. I wasn't prepared to let a soldier get sacrificed, thrown under a bus, just because what the minister needed was a bad guy. They've got drone footage of all this. Yeah, and if they wanted to actually put people on trial, they'd use the drone footage. And they don't want to use the drone footage because the drone footage, A, the Americans don't want them to, but secondly, that shows that they must have known at the time.
Yeah. After all this time chasing up war crimes reports only to get constantly pushed back by his superiors, now they suddenly wanted him to punish a man he thought was innocent. And this was the final straw. David decided to start photocopying all the dodgy reports, all the proof of war crimes he could get a hold of, and all the evidence of this big cover-up, and leak it to a journalist at the prestigious state broadcaster. a guy called Dan Oakes from the ABC. Now, David was risking his life leaking this, and what the ABC ended up doing with it was unfortunate, right? Like, instead of a story of like corruption at the highest levels of government, they turned it into like a cultural issue. A story about how a group of bad boy soldiers had become desensitized and hyped each other up to murder innocent people.
They basically painted it as bad soldiers. But they don't really ever point the finger at the leadership to say he didn't really do this on his own, in the sense that they promoted him, they never really looked into it, there were complaints. If a general either knew or should have known, they're liable too, but they've managed to forget all about that.
Now,
That's the difference between someone who is fully captured by its own state and is doing propaganda for its own state versus someone like, and I hate to bring his name up now because he sucks ass now, Glenn Greenwald. You can, when you get stories like this, you either capture and kill or capture and basically like shift the attention away. Or you take a story like this and you do decent journalism. Doing real journalism on a story like this requires bravery and requires you to basically give up on potentially having dreams of a higher position of power in media. But sometimes that can cause a lot of resentment in your eyes, especially when you see the way that the American media is glazed up as though they are doing heroic jobs in the Trump era. All the while you've been completely fucking, you've become a pariah basically. And then you end up listening to the Red Scare podcast too much and you become this weird fucking right-wing delusional weirdo. Even though Glenn is, I suspect, probably pretty decent on the issue of Palestine, because he has consistently been. Don't ask him about contemporary American politics. But this does not, of course, take away from all the good work that he did do.
The soldiers committing these crimes were psychopaths, right? The ABC's not wrong, but they completely ignored David's documents about all the powerful people who enabled it and covered it up. It's letting the leadership off the hook, right? And either way, there's no like legal or ethical way to invade and terrorize an innocent country. Like what we did to the people of Afghanistan is a senseless crime in itself, and no one was prosecuted for it.
There's far too much emphasis on war crime, you know. It's 200,000 Afghan dead and then giving the place back to Taliban. I mean, no one's lost their job over that. Why
that's not considered a war crime.
The biggest crimes were committed by the leaders.
But unfortunately, the ABC went for the path of least resistance, right? They published a war crime story, which felt like a victory for the anti-war left, but they also exonerated all the leaders, which, you know, should have been a victory for the government. But the government didn't care how lightly the ABC tread, right? They collaborated with a whistleblower and they needed to be punished. So the government did what any democracy does in this situation.
And there's a raid happening right here at the ABC right now, just 100 metres or so that way.
They sent in the federal police to raid the national broadcaster and all these journalists' homes. And everyone was terrified. Once the federal agents walked out of the building, even the news reporter who was meant to be covering it sounded like a 12-year-old trying to make small talk with his girlfriend's dad.
Was there anything wrong there?
Now, David was hiding in Spain long before the ABC published their story. He's on the run from the most powerful people in the world and he's obviously scared. But David told us that the most painful part about being a whistleblower is knowing you have to leave your loved ones behind. He had to watch his daughters grow up from the other side of the world. Eventually, he gave up on hiding, and he did something I've only ever seen someone do in an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. He flew back to Australia, risked life imprisonment by a corrupt government just so he could spend one night at a daddy-daughter dance.
She kept saying there's a father-daughter dance later in the year, and I'd be like, if I come home I'll get arrested, and if I get arrested I'll probably be in jail a long time. She just said, I want you to come back for the dance. and I could tell when I spoke to her, I could tell it was just silent. And I could just tell she was silently crying on the end of the phone, and I was like, oh, no father can handle it.
So, David came back to Australia.
never really knew
I didn't know that was the reason why he came back. That's so sad.
just how terribly
What a fucking gross injustice, dude.
Now, this moment didn't last very long. David was arrested and put on trial for leaking classified information. But it wasn't a normal trial where, you can defend yourself, right? It was the other kind of trial where the judge turns to you and says, sorry, mate, the Americans said the evidence you're using for your defense isn't actually allowed for national security reasons. So we've decided you have to defend yourself with zero evidence.
The government was given authority to bundle up evidence and run out the back door with it. Makes it impossible for us realistically to go to trial.
I'm not giving up hope. He's done the right thing. I've said that from the beginning. Truth and justice will prevail, and I'm incredibly proud of him, as are his two girls.
So yeah, obviously since he can't defend himself, he's going to jail, which sets an insane precedent here in Australia. Like it's the death of whistleblower laws, right? This ruling means that if you have information that your boss is committing a crime and you leak that information, then you're the criminal.
The judge ruled to say there are no exceptions. If you're in the military and the orders are don't release information, it doesn't matter whether the chief of the Defence Force is selling secrets to our enemies or a pedophile ring or war crimes. We didn't even get to the facts. He just said there are no exceptions.
Now, all this time, the ABC was scared silent. They never once mentioned David McBride since they got raided back in 2019, and David's legal team started to get a bit suspicious. When they asked the ABC for evidence to help his case, they refused to cooperate, which was confusing. But suddenly, it all made sense, right? A few weeks before he's sentenced to, prison, the ABC finally pipes up to release a hit piece on him. Australia's premier journalism program, Four Corners, was faced with this bombshell story of government cover-ups, war crimes, and the brutal erosion of our democratic freedoms. But instead, they decided to run this documentary suggesting that David McBride isn't a real whistleblower and he doesn't deserve your attention. They made absurd claims that he actually wanted to cover up war crimes himself, and he somehow leaked all these incriminating documents by accident. They pointed at the fact that, among all the evidence of war crimes that he gave them, there was that one soldier that he thought was improperly prosecuted and used as a smokescreen. And David wanted to protect this guy. And this was enough for the ABC to smear him and turn his whole story into like the only whistleblower in the world who leaked war crimes because he really wanted to.
Australia is really as corrupt as the US. It's even worse. It's worse because they're corrupt because they're cucked. Like, think about that. You are prosecuting and arresting your own fucking veteran who did a phenomenally brave act specifically because America said so. It's so bad. It really isn't. It doesn't get worse in the US. I mean, yeah, of course it doesn't get worse than the US. It's just that it makes it even worse because, it makes it even worse in the eyes of Australians. It should, because they're doing it specifically for motherfucking American interests.
To cover up war crimes.
David McBride wanted to expose that our soldiers were being unfairly targeted, they were being unfairly investigated. It's a much greyer and murkier and messier story than people appreciate.
It's honestly a mind-melting thing to watch. Like, the crazy part is they spent 6 months filming this with him. They met his family. He opened up about wanting to commit suicide, for God's sake.
There are times when I am really close.
That's a lot to say out loud at this.
Now, I can't stress how cruel this was. Dan Oakes received a prestigious medal for journalism for publishing a handful of David's leaks. And now, just as the government is deciding, how long David should go to prison for leaking it to him, he decides to try his best to make sure that David goes to prison for as long as possible. They literally sacrificed David to prove to the government that they can be trusted. They'll never publish leaks again. They made sure the big guys got the message that journalism is dead in Australia, and our democratic institutions that are meant to keep the government in check are completely at their disposal. So yeah, David got fucked. But what happened to all the war criminals that we now know about thanks to David? Well, let's go back to the start of the video to our first war criminal, Ben Robert Smith. Following McBride's leaks, a couple of journalists published some more detailed allegations about Ben Robert Smith. Ben was pissed. He's a war hero, after all. You know, these allegations are grossly offensive, and look, he's got some pretty powerful friends. So these journalists decided, you know, they'd give up and just settle and pay him. And he said, no, you're going to pay more. I'm suing you for defamation. So he's...
Isn't that the dude who drank out of the leg? That's the one, which ironically, the leg behind Alexa is from his earlier video where he makes fun of the war criminal who drank out of an Afghan man's prosthetic leg. Made a fucking shoey. Just think about that. Like, not a...
He essentially forced these journalists to prove these allegations in court. So they found all these witnesses and evidence, and what they ended up proving in the defamation case was so much worse than the initial allegations. It's the most insane stuff you've ever heard. Like stories about him grabbing a little Afghani kid and blowing his brains out and then telling his fellow soldiers, this was the most beautiful thing I ever saw. Or the time he executed a disabled man and then took his prosthetic leg and kept it as a trophy, and now he just takes it around to parties so him and his soldier buddies can drink beer out of it. So this isn't just a war crime. This is the kind of demonic shit you'd only see in like a fantasy novel. This is orc behavior.
What about their legs? They don't need those.
He's shown us exactly the kind of demons we create when we invade and brutalize a third world country for 20 years without any accountability. Now, the funny part is no one had to know about Ben's crimes. Like, all the big guys had his back. All the politicians and the oligarchs and the generals, they were all there vouching for him. He just had to shut the fuck up and live his life. But he decided to spend $40 million trying to force a court to prove that he's the vilest piece of shit in Australia. Like, this astronomical cell phone would be hilarious if it wasn't for the fact that after that, nothing happened. There were no consequences. He wasn't punished. He gets to live a normal life. Like, whoopsie, everyone makes mistakes. Run along now, Ben. This psychopathic orc is free to just roam around my city, and then every time I leave my house, I risk bumping into him in his freaky little pants. No one's threatening to put him in jail for what he did. You know, the only person who's going to jail is the one who told us about all this. Our mate, David. This is David's last week of freedom. Our last chance to hang out. After that, the next few decades of his life are meant to set an example to anyone in the future who dares to defy our government and our role in America's wars.
It's not so much about the last war. It's about the next war. And this is why I think the Americans are so worried about it. They need to know people in Australia are not going to blurt out our secrets. Like another sort of Gulf of Tonkin incident around Taiwan, where they say, oh, the Chinese have fucking shelled us. We need to all go to war over something which never really happened. That's what I worry about. Unless we break that cycle where we don't just say, yes, Minister, all the time. If nothing else, you've got your soldiers' welfare to think about.
Oh, dude, Australia 100%. Australia is one of the most cucked America nations out there. Oh. Any kind of anti-Chinese activity, they're going to be the fucking tip of the spear, okay? Who's number one if not Australia? Canada, England. All of the other, Five Eyes, all the Five Eyes countries are like this. Yeah. Australia media has been, Australia fucking absolutely loves, the Australian media loves potential war with China, which is hilarious because, like, it's basically, like, as far as capital interest goes, it is hyper reliant on China. Which makes it really funny when you think about it. When they're like, yeah, I can't wait to fucking go to war with China, which owns our country. It's like trying to fucking kill your mom because your dad said so.
Just fucking send them to their deaths or just fuck them over. You don't do it just because for some political dickhead wants to boost their popularity.
So if you care about any of this, right, go to David's GoFundMe and chip in to his legal fund. With your help, he'll have the money to keep appealing his sentence, and maybe we can make his life a little less brutal. Also, we can show the government that people care about this, right? Maybe we could show a future whistleblower that people are going to have their back if they decide to do the right thing and tell us when the government's breaking the law. Also, if you want to keep supporting videos like this, please go to our Patreon. The link's in the description. It's just $5 a month and you get a full-length exclusive video every month. Thanks so much, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Do it.
Phenomenal video. An absolute banger. My goats.